Bienvenidos a la lección 20 de este nuestro segundo curso en español. En esta lección vamos a ver una variedad de temas distintos. Algunos que ya hemos visto un poco en el pasado y otros totalmente nuevos. El tema principal de esta lección será estudiar cuándo debemos usar el verbo estar y cuándo debemos usar el verbo ser. A pesar de nuestro análisis de este tema en el primer curso, es importante repasar las diferencias entre estar y ser que ya estudiamos antes y también ver unos contextos nuevos en que se pueden usar los dos verbos. La verdad es que estar y ser son verbos que se usan todo el tiempo en español y no siempre es fácil decidir cuál de los dos verbos se debe usar en un contexto específico. Además de trabajar con estar y ser, al final de la lección voy a hablar sobre la importancia de tener una buena actitud al estudiar español. ¿Oíste lo que acabo de decir? Es una frase que tiene 3 usos del infinitivo. Esta forma verbal que hemos estudiado bastante recientemente. Dije, primero, voy a hablar, que es la expresión más ir más a más infinitivo. Segundo, mencioné la importancia de tener, que es de una preposición y tener un infinitivo que funciona como objeto de la preposición. Y tercero, dije, al estudiar, que describe el momento cuando se estudia español. Y al hablar de esta última idea, la de mantener una buena actitud, voy a relacionar el estudio de una segunda lengua con el estudio de música. Our first topic today then is an analysis of the verb to be in Spanish, which we know can be expressed both with the verb estar and the verb ser. In a previous lesson in this course, as we were discussing past participles, we looked at estar plus a past participle and saw how this shows the result of a previous action. In this lesson, we'll be looking at a whole range of uses of ser and estar. Some of you will remember that we discussed uses of ser and estar in our first course as well. We did, but it's most definitely a good idea to return to this topic now because estar and ser are among the most commonly used verbs in Spanish. Given that they're used so often, and that at times it's difficult to know which of these verbs to use, it will be important that you be able to distinguish when you need to use estar and when you need to use ser. Moreover, we'll be doing more with estar and ser in this lesson than we did in the first course, and we'll be going into more depth as we analyze some of the more nuanced ways these two verbs can be employed. So, here's the approach I'm going to take. I'll start with estar. We'll discuss the contexts in which estar must be used. Then we'll look at those contexts that require ser. Finally, we'll look at those situations in which both estar and ser could be used. And I'll explain what it means in these contexts if you choose to use estar and what it means if you use ser. Let me add that I'm starting with estar because there are fewer contexts in which estar is used than is the case with ser. After getting a good sense of the uses of estar, which are a bit limited, we'll then move on to examine the greater variety of contexts in which it's appropriate to use ser. Estar, estar, estar. How do I use thee? Let me count the ways. I use thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. Let me stop right there. In an earlier lesson, I apologized to Miguel de Cervantes for my adaptation of his work, and now I must beg pardon of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, but I would like to make use of her most useful mathematical idea. So let's count the ways in which one can use estar. For each of these uses, I'll first explain the context in which estar is employed, and then I'll give an example or two. 1. Estar is used with the present participle to talk about something happening right now. Estoy enseñando la lección 20 ahora mismo y ustedes están aprendiendo los diferentes usos de ser y estar. 2. Estar tells the location of someone or something. For example, how would you say, my friends are at the library? Mis amigos están en la biblioteca. And if someone asks you where Montevideo is located, you might answer, Montevideo está en Uruguay. 3. Estar describes the result of a previous action. As I mentioned in a previous lesson, we spent some time on this use of estar, which is typically followed by a past participle. Yo me casé con mi esposa hace muchos años, así que estoy casado. La abuelita de Marcos murió recientemente. Ahora todos los abuelos de Marcos están muertos. 4. Estar is used to describe someone's physical or emotional state or the condition of someone or something at a specific moment. ¿Cómo están los chicos? Están nerviosos porque el examen es mañana. La cocina está limpia, pero el baño está sucio. This context of describing the condition of something also applies to how food and drinks taste. La comida está muy rica. We know that typically weather is described using the verb hacer, as in hace mal tiempo or hace sol. With some weather expressions, it's possible, however, to use estar. It's cloudy, for example, is está nublado. And this use of estar with weather is just another case of describing the condition of something at a specific moment. 5. Our fifth and final use of estar is actually related to the idea of a physical or emotional state or condition. Specifically, there are a number of important expressions that begin with estar de. Let's have a look at some of these expressions. And first, let me introduce you to a few nouns that you'll often see coupled with estar. Repitan: el viaje, el humor, el acuerdo. It won't be very difficult to remember these new nouns. El viaje is clearly related to the Spanish verb to travel, which is viajar. Commonly, the English word humor has to do with something that's funny, but it can also mean mood or temperament, as in he's of cheerful humor. El acuerdo is a cognate with the English noun accord, which is, of course, an agreement. Now, the expressions beginning with estar de, repitan: estar de viaje, estar de vacaciones, estar de buen humor, estar de mal humor, estar de acuerdo, estar de pie, estar de rodillas. So, let's use a few of these. How would you say, I never agree with my brother? Nunca estoy de acuerdo con mi hermano. Now say, all my friends are on vacation. Todos mis amigos están de vacaciones. One more. Why is Roberto in a bad mood? ¿Por qué está de mal humor Roberto? You'll notice on this question, I put the subject Roberto after the verbal expression está de mal humor. It's common when asking a question to put the verb before the subject. We just saw 5 uses of estar. Now we will see 8 uses of ser. 1. Ser is used when expressing time. So if you're referring to the hour, the day, or the date, use ser. Hoy es martes, son las 2:30 de la tarde, es el 3 de noviembre. 2. Ser is used with the preposition de to express where someone or something is from, what something is made of, or possession. Beatriz es de Ecuador. Esta pluma es de Enrique. No es mi pluma. Mis pantalones son de algodón. You'll remember that el algodón means cotton. How would you say they are from Chile? Son de Chile. How about the books are Roberto's? Son los libros de Roberto. And let me point out that estar is almost always used to talk about location. One exception to this, and we just saw an example of it when I said Beatriz es de Ecuador, is that when talking about where someone is from, you use ser. 3. Here's the only other time we use ser when talking about location, to talk about where an event is taking place. La reunión es en mi oficina. Los conciertos van a ser en el teatro. Once again, the only 2 times to use ser when talking about location are to tell where someone is from and to describe where an event is taking place. 4. Ser is used, and this is very common, to identify someone. Ella es Carla. Estos hombres son mis primos. Yo soy profesor. Enrique y Marisa son españoles. So there are different kinds of identification going on in these examples. Who someone is, family relationships, occupation, nationality. In all of these cases of identification, ser is used. 5. Ser is used to describe inherent characteristics of someone or something. Mi madre es muy inteligente. Eduardo y Claudia son altos y guapos. Este libro es excelente. 6. Ser can be used with the preposition para to explain for whom or for what something is intended. Estos regalos son para los niños. Or consider the noun. Repitan, la máquina, which is sort of, but not really, a cognate. You decide. In any case, I'll now use máquina along with la copia, which is a cognate for copy, to express for what something is intended. Esta máquina es para hacer copias. 7. Ser is used with lots of impersonal expressions to generalize or talk about something usually understood to be true. Es importante practicar mucho. Es necesario hacer ejercicio para tener buena salud. Es verdad que se habla mucho español en la ciudad de Los Ángeles. 8. Ser is used when talking about prices or mathematics. ¿Cuánto es? 3 y 11 son 14. Okay, let's do a bit of practice with these verbs. You'll see a sentence missing just the verb, and you tell me what form of ser or estar should go in the blank. So here, for sentence 1, we have es, because being beautiful is an inherent characteristic of Madrid. 2 is está, because sad is an emotional state. 3 is son, identifying my friends. 4 is son, because it describes where the elections take place. Finally, 5 is está trabajando, which uses the present participle to talk about something happening right now. Let's look now at some cases where both ser and estar are possible. And let's first consider some adjectives that change meaning depending on which of these verbs they're used with. In general, what we'll see is that the adjective used with ser describes an inherent characteristic of someone or something. Used with estar, on the other hand, por otro lado, the adjective expresses a state or condition at a specific moment. One adjective that shows this distinction well is aburrido. If I say, for example, Ricardo es aburrido, that's quite an insult. I've just used ser to express that Ricardo is an inherently boring person. Ricardo está aburrido, however, just means that Ricardo happens to be bored right now. Estar is not describing an essential characteristic of Ricardo, but rather simply expressing that he's feeling bored. Otro adjetivo con diferentes significados es la palabra rico. Si una persona es rica, quiere decir que tiene mucho dinero. Una comida que está rica, por otro lado, es una comida deliciosa. Listo, used with ser, is a synonym of inteligente, which makes sense because ser expresses inherent characteristics of someone. Este chico es muy listo means this boy is very smart. With estar, however, listo is a synonym of preparado, meaning simply that someone is ready right now. How would you put this into English? ¿Están listos para aprender más? That means, are you ready to learn more? Another adjective with varying meanings depending on the verb it's used with is vivo. With ser, the adjective vivo means clever, while with estar, it's describing the condition of being alive. Compare these two sentences. Sentence 1. Tu sobrina es muy viva y entiende francés bien. Sentence 2. Los viajeros todavía están vivos. The adjective vivo occurs in both, but the meaning is different. We would translate sentence 1 as, your niece is very clever and understands French well. The second sentence would be, the travelers are still alive. Here are a few adjectives you should know because you'll find them useful when describing people. Repitan. Delgado, gordo, bello, hermoso, religioso, determinado, intelectual, poderoso, espiritual. So there are a few obvious cognates there, including religioso, determinado, intelectual, espiritual. We know that the noun for power is el poder, so it makes sense that the adjective powerful is poderoso. Back to our two verbs meaning to be. One way to think about the difference between ser and estar is that ser describes how something is typically, in general, while estar describes a change from the norm. Miguel es delgado, for instance, expresses that Miguel is a thin person. If I say Miguel está delgado, I'm saying that Miguel looks thin or that he's thin now but wasn't before. The use of estar signifies some sort of change from the normal situation. María está muy bella esta noche is expressing that Maria looks beautiful tonight. And I'm not saying here that she's usually ugly, but rather that because of her clothing, her attitude, something, she looks particularly beautiful tonight. Here's another example. Mi vecino Juan siempre ha sido muy simpático conmigo. Siempre me ayudaba con cosas y hablábamos mucho. Pero algo cambió y ahora no me ayuda con nada y no quiere hablar conmigo tampoco. Ahora está muy antipático. So what's going on there with estar and ser? Well, I used ser saying, siempre ha sido simpático conmigo. He's always been nice with me. So that's how he normally is. And yet, algo cambió. Something changed. And to express this change, I now use estar to say, ahora está muy antipático. Now he's very unpleasant. Once again, ser is expressing the normal situation, while estar describes a change from the norm. You'll have opportunities both in the speaking activities and in the workbook to practice more with estar and ser. On to the next topic. Having the right attitude as you work to acquire Spanish. As I mentioned in a previous lesson, there is much in common between studying a second language and studying music. And I'm going to talk right now about some of the similarities of these two endeavors because I want to give you a way to think about language acquisition that might help you avoid a common problem I've seen over the years. To my mind, there are three main similarities between, for example, playing the piano and communicating in Spanish. One is that both fields are about performance, not simply knowledge. What I mean by that is it's not enough to know something. You have to be able to do it. Knowing your verb conjugations or the proper fingerings for a certain scale is useful, but they're not enough on their own. Face it, other than your teacher, no one at all wants to hear you conjugate verbs or play scales. The real goal, of course, is to learn the fingerings and the verb conjugations to help you play piano better or communicate more effectively in Spanish. So, success comes from performing the skill you're working to acquire. Tied in with this notion of performance is the reality that in both fields, time matters. It's not enough to perform your music or your language with accuracy. You also have to perform in a timely fashion. Why does understanding written Spanish tend to be easier for most students than understanding spoken Spanish? Well, there are a few reasons. For one, and I've mentioned this before, it's typically easier to spot cognates when reading than when listening. But even more important than that is the reality that when you're working to understand a text, how quickly you do it doesn't typically matter very much. If you have a dictionary and need to look up a word every other sentence, go ahead and do it. You've got the time. The text you're reading isn't in a hurry. But if you're conversing with someone, it's really not feasible to ask your interlocutor to wait while you look up a word every 15 seconds. In short, time pressure is a big factor, both when you're listening to spoken Spanish and when you're speaking yourself. Of course, time also matters greatly in music. If you can play all the right notes, but not yet at the proper tempo, you haven't mastered the piece of music you're studying yet. This need to perform well and perform in a timely fashion leads me to the third similarity between progressing as a musician and as a language learner. Mastery in these two fields is achieved mainly through practice. Ask a music teacher, what's the number one thing a student of the piano should do to play better? The answer, almost certainly, will be that the student should practice more. As a language teacher, I say the same thing. More practice with the language leads to more improvement in your ability to communicate. Quite simply, the students who improve the most are those who have the most exposure to the language. Language learners who read in Spanish, write in Spanish, listen to the language, and seek out opportunities to speak it, those are the students who make the most progress in acquiring the language. Okay, so languages and music are about performing a skill, and you perform better if you practice a skill. No big surprise there. But here's why I bring up the similarities between studying music and studying a language. In both cases, it's not uncommon for students to sabotage themselves with some faulty thinking. And I'd like to help you avoid this pitfall so you can flourish as a language learner. In the world of the piano, for example, students sometimes downplay their own possibilities of improvement by claiming that they're not really very talented. If only they had the magical and all-powerful talent that was gifted to other far superior pianists, they could, of course, play well. But according to them, a lack of musical talent is holding them back. Well, if you're convinced that talent is a necessary prerequisite for playing the piano well, and if you furthermore believe that you yourself are not talented, your chances of improving your playing substantially are not very good. In my world of languages, I'll often meet with students who have similarly self-defeating attitudes. They'll talk to me early in the semester, before or after class, or maybe in office hours, and say something like, "I'm not really a language person," or "I didn't get the language gene." Along with this negative self-perception, they'll typically continue by saying something like, "I doubt I'll do well in this class," or they'll say, "I'm not overly optimistic about the possibility of communicating well in Spanish." Like the self-described untalented pianists, language students with this mindset are not only preparing to fail, they're also justifying their lack of progress because, according to them, any efforts they might put forth are futile. They just don't have what it takes to acquire a language. Okay, so let me take a moment to address this concept of the language gene, according to which some students are capable of learning languages while others simply aren't. And let's imagine that you believe somehow you have no or very little language talent. I have a few thoughts for you, some encouraging words I hope can help. First, the question. How well are you understanding what I'm saying right now in English? Are you able to understand most of it? All of it? If we were together right now, could we carry on a conversation together? Clearly, most of you watching this are thinking, "Bill, come on now. I'm a native English speaker. Of course I understand you and could respond to what you're saying." Based on that, my conclusion is that if there is a language gene, you did get it. And your ability to speak and understand English is proof of that. But wait a minute, you might think. Communicating in a first language is a given, but developing skills in a second is much more difficult. Okay then, so maybe you have the language gene, but not the second language gene. To which my response is, there is no second language gene. There is only level of interest in acquiring a second language and amount of practice. These factors will determine your improvement in the language, level, and interest and amount of practice. Let me be clear about what I'm saying here. I'm not insisting that all language learners are identical or that they all proceed at the same pace. There are most certainly some students who seem to pick things up more quickly than others. Some language learners, for instance, have an easier time than others in the very earliest phases of language learning. Others seem to hit their stride later, but have slowly but surely been improving their language abilities all along. I'm not denying that there are differences in the rates at which students make progress with a second language. What I am saying is that if you're really interested in improving your Spanish, and if this level of interest results in lots of engagement with the language, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, you will improve your ability to communicate in Spanish. How do I know this? Because I've had a number of students over the years who were initially convinced they were very bad at languages and now they communicate in Spanish really well. It certainly took them time and lots of effort, but more than that, it took a change in their attitude as well. I remember talking to one of these previously pessimistic students who developed excellent Spanish. I asked her how she thought it was possible that her Spanish got so good when she was convinced she wasn't a language person. Her answer was instructive. She said, "At first I was convinced I wouldn't be able to communicate well in Spanish. But at a certain point, my mental energy was so focused on understanding and being understood, I sort of lost track of the idea I couldn't do it. And eventually I realized that I actually could communicate well in Spanish." My conclusion: don't be held back by some negative self-perception that you may have developed in middle school or high school or even more recently. It doesn't matter if you've taken a Spanish class before but didn't progress much, or if you had years of Spanish in high school or college but don't feel your Spanish skills are good now. Whether you've had success in the past or not in acquiring a language, if you keep working on improving your Spanish and maintain a high level of interest coupled with extensive practice in listening, speaking, reading, and writing, your language skills most certainly will improve. Y ahora concluyo mi discurso motivacional que tiene el propósito de animarlos a seguir con sus estudios de español. Repitan estas palabras nuevas. El discurso motivacional, el propósito, animar. So that's my pep talk, mi discurso motivacional for today. I encourage you to keep practicing, keep communicating in Spanish. Ya hemos llegado a la conclusión de nuestra lección. Nos vemos dentro de muy poco. Hasta luego.
Glosario en audio. Lección 20.
Give the Spanish for the following English words. Then repeat the Spanish word. Main, principal,
Principal.
trip,
El viaje.
mood,
El humor.
agreement,
El acuerdo.
to be on a trip,
Estar de viaje.
to be on vacation,
Estar de vacaciones.
to be in a good mood,
Estar de buen humor.
to be in a bad mood,
Estar de mal humor.
to agree with,
Estar de acuerdo.
to stand,
Estar de pie.
to kneel,
Estar de rodillas.
to be smart,
Ser listo.
to be clever,
Ser vivo.
to be alive,
Estar vivo.
traveler,
El viajero.
religion,
La religión.
thin,
Delgado.
fat,
Gordo.
beautiful,
Bello.
beautiful, lovely,
Hermoso.
religious,
Religioso.
determined,
Determinado.
intellectual,
Intelectual.
powerful,
Poderoso.
spiritual,
Espiritual.
speech, talk,
El discurso.
motivational,
motivacional,
Purpose.
el propósito,
To encourage.
animar. Actividades de conversación. Lección 20.
Give the English for the following Spanish words.
El viaje,
Trip.
el humor,
Mood.
el acuerdo,
Agreement.
estar de viaje,
To be on a trip.
estar de buen humor,
To be in a good mood.
estar de mal humor,
To be in a bad mood.
estar de acuerdo,
To agree with.
intelectual,
Intellectual.
poderoso,
Powerful.
el discurso,
Speech. Talk.
el propósito,
Purpose.
animar,
To encourage. Decide if the following sentences need to use estar or ser. For example,
soy muy cansada de estar de pie.
estoy.
Ese está, un pueblo muy pobre.
Es.
Ellos han hecho muchos proyectos exitosos. Ellos son muy listos.
Son.
Ustedes no eran en su casa cuando sus padres llegaron.
Estaban.
Ha llovido toda la semana, pero hoy el clima está estupendo.
Está.
La enfermera llamó a tu padre. Él es muy preocupado.
Está.
Esta sopa me encanta, pero no la puedo comer todavía porque está muy caliente.
Está.
Siempre sucede lo mismo. Mi primo nunca quiere celebrar nada. Él está muy aburrido.
Es.
Priscila tiene mucha fiebre. Ella es enferma desde ayer.
Está.
Mi mamá está la mayor de sus hermanos.
Es. Complete these sentences using the correct form of estar or ser. For example,
Él enfermo.
está.
Ellos en su casa cuando empezó a llover.
Estaban.
Me encanta tu camisa. ¿De algodón?
Es.
¡Qué tarde! Las 3 de la mañana.
Son.
Yo haciendo las prácticas de español.
Estoy.
La casa de mis padres en la montaña.
Está.
Elena tendrá una cirugía en 2 horas. Ella, muy nerviosa.
Está.
Mi mejor amiga, de Guatemala.
Es.
Anoche nosotros a ver una película.
Fuimos.
Ellos de viaje por el Caribe.
Están. O estuvieron. O estaban.
El concierto de la orquesta de la semana pasada, excelente.
Estuvo. Listen to the conversation between Bill and Laura and then answer the question saying cierto for true, falso for false. Laura, ¿conoces a la nueva profesora de sociología?
No, no la conozco. ¿Cuándo la conociste?
La semana pasada.
Ella está aquí sola.
No. Ella está casada y de hecho su marido y su hijo acaban de llegar a la ciudad.
¿De dónde son ellos?
Ellos son de Perú. Están buscando un apartamento y una escuela para su hijo de 7 años. Su hijo está muy nervioso y muy triste porque dejó a sus amigos de Perú.
Me gustaría conocerlos. Yo los puedo ayudar a buscar apartamento. Hay unos apartamentos preciosos que están cerca de la universidad.
Puedo darte su número de teléfono. Ella es muy simpática y le va a gustar conocer a otras familias.
Solamente el marido de la profesora es de Perú.
Falso.
El hijo de la profesora tiene 7 años.
Cierto.
Bill conoció a la profesora de sociología hace 2 semanas.
Falso.
El hijo y el marido de la profesora acaban de llegar a la ciudad.
Cierto.
El hijo de la profesora está muy emocionado.
Falso.
La familia de la profesora es de Uruguay.
Falso.